Hello, everybody. We are joined once again with our host, Dom, and our lovely guest and friend of the channel, Jesse. Today we're
Hi.
Today we're going to be talking about episode 3 of Lower Decks. But before we get into,
And
oh, sorry.
well, I want to say that we're calling this stream. I mean, the episode of Lower Decks is "We'll Always Have Tom
Yes.
Paris." So this stream is "We'll Always Have Dom Paris."
Oh.
So yeah,
See what
I
you
just
did
wanted
there.
to do that before we started. Get the puns out of the way.
I mean, there should be puns all the way throughout.
Oh,
If there's
yeah,
not, I'm
definitely.
leaving. I will leave. I will leave this stream if there's not more puns.
I mean, that's why we brought you on. We just wanted you to come and bring more puns
Yeah.
onto the stream. So, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's all I'm here for.
Comedic relief.
Yeah.
But yeah, before we get into it, as you said, the episode we're talking about is "We'll Always Have Tom Paris." Jesse, what did you think of this episode right off the bat?
I really loved this episode. Honestly, had one of my favorite storylines, especially the Tendi Mariner storyline. Felt like one of my favorite storylines in Lower Decks in general. Probably close to episode 9 of Crisis Point last year. I basically really loved this episode. I loved the cameo, and I have only one major issue with this episode that we'll talk about in a little bit. But it is a major issue that I have with it. But overall, I loved this episode.
What about you, Dom? Does your opinion
I-
differ?
My opinion differs on the thing that I like, but Jess says she likes, but well, she doesn't like. And we'll get into that. But overall, I really liked this episode. I really liked how it itself brought notice to the fact that Tendi and Mariner haven't been on a mission before. And they're like, oh, that's kind of a glaring omission. We should really mix it up every now and again. So I really liked that the writers themselves were like, why didn't we do this in season 1? Oh, God. Okay, we can just make this a thing in this episode. And I just really like seeing more of Tendi's, I guess, backstory and more of like, oh yeah, she's really into Klingon acid rock,
love
and
that.
you know, why listen to Klingon if it's not acidic
Or
and
punky.
And I just want Klingon songs of singing over
The whale,
disgraced
yeah.
Klingons.
I love
or,
it.
Oh,
Yeah.
I cut my hand off and I'm gonna scream about it. That's just.
Did you see that Mary Chieffo, the Rel, she recorded a Klingon song for Star Trek Online like
Yes.
What?
I saw
like
that.
2 or 3 weeks ago.
I'm jealous.
Which I'm like,
was
yes,
brilliant.
perfect
I
timing.
must listen.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
they released
we've
it
got
online
the,
somewhere.
we had the Klingon band in Picard, at least like a T-shirt of them, which Castro, is it? Yeah, it's Castro was wearing. The Klingon, I think, sex phases is what they were called or something.
yeah.
So I like that we're getting more Klingon music that isn't just
Opera.
Klingon
Yeah,
opera.
I'm like, come on, guys. You know there's
yeah.
something other than opera. Just because it's Worf's favorite doesn't mean it's the only thing out there.
Yeah, I mean, Worf's a
It's
stickler,
He's
so,
a
yeah.
stick in the mud sometimes. Let's be real.
Yep.
He's a freaking stick in the mud.
It's the thing I like about Lower Decks is that like it's like all of Star Trek up until this point, like everyone was into like opera and classical music and like Shakespeare and Moby Dick. It's like I get it. It's all hoity-toity, but come on, you gotta enjoy some like acid punk from every once in a while. Like get over yourselves, Star Trek. And
exactly. Yeah.
But so did we want to do what we liked and what we didn't like? Since
Well, I think first, Brie,
yes.
did you like the episode as a total?
must also
what's
give
your
an
opinion?
Yourself.
Share your
Oh,
opinion.
heck. The host has to say. I actually really liked it. I thought it was funny. I really did like the bit with Shax, with him coming back and them spending
Okay,
the
we're
whole
talking about it now.
yeah, spending the whole time being like, what did it? Like, I don't understand. Why don't we talk about it? And then the one time someone does talk about it, they're like, oh, you are out of line! Go for demotion! And I'm like, oh my god. Like, I laughed so hard during that. And then, I don't know. I really like, and to be fair, I have to make this correction because it bothered me so much that I have to make this correction. When I recorded the video of the thing, I said, And what we thought we heard was that you fight 3 visages of yourself. It's not.
But,
It's
yeah.
3 visages of your father, and then you eat a heart. Because I
And
watched
yeah,
it.
and then the surviving father
You
makes you eat
your own heart.
heart.
Right. I watched it with subtitles finally since I could.
Yes.
And I was like, no, because I recorded it, without having watched the subtitles first, and I was like, no, I made this glaring
I will
error.
apologize for that in the script. I did not watch with subtitles.
That's okay, but
because there weren't subtitles for that.
It's okay. I don't think anyone else would
I
notice
feel-
it because not a lot of people watch it with subtitles. But I love it because you get to see all this little stuff. Like in that same little bit, he was like, "What was up with T'Pol's hair in that one season?" Like, so meta joke that just slipped in the background.
It feels like that's probably something they were like in the recording
Yeah,
booth, and they
and
just
they-
had the actor like do a bunch of random stuff, and I want to hear all of it.
And like you never, and like they didn't really think it was gonna be picked up, but then the person transcribing it was like, he like picked up. They're like, "What was the deal with T'Pol's hair in that one season?" And it's true.
They must
So
they must
funny.
know. Like us
Yeah.
Trekkies, we will pick apart
I
everything.
loved it.
Mhm.
I laughed so hard when I finally got to watch it with subtitles.
But yeah, I guess we have to now talk about the shacks in the room,
Yeah, we must.
as that is
I
Jesse's issue. So take it away.
I know. I feel bad because I apparently the only one that like had a major issue with it. But here's my thing with Shaq swimming back. One of the things that I really love about Lower Decks is that it does such a good job of having continuity. And while it's a comedy show that is much lower stakes than any other Star Trek show, it also just had a certain sense of continuity and weight and follow through that you didn't really even have on other Star Trek shows prior to like basically Discovery, maybe Enterprise, arguably. And so I really appreciated that there were like these moments that tied through, especially in season 1. Like you had Badgie, and then you had like the baby bear sort of thing. Like there was just this really good like emotional and physical follow through. And Shax's coming back in this episode, like last season, Shax's death felt like a really emotional moment that like while funny and not the biggest focus of that episode, like it was actually very emotional and hit me very hard in a surprising way. And it feels like Shaq's going back in this episode. It's kind of been indicative of this whole episode as a whole, is that some of the continuity that the show has been building up all of season 1 has started to be rolled back in this season so far. Like Boimler's back on the Titan in the exact same role that he was in. Like as if there's no real change there. The relationship between Mariner and her mother has pretty much gone back to the same sort of like they're antagonistic to each other. It's a little bit better, but still a little bit antagonistic. And so it feels like the physical stakes of and I want to make a distinction here. The physical stakes of the show feel like they have rolled back a little ways, and Shaq's coming back feels like that is indicative of that. And again, it's a comedy show. It's a funny show. It doesn't need to have the biggest stakes. But I liked that Lower Decks had a little bit more of like, I could invest in these characters' like journeys going forward because there were some stakes. And Shaq's coming back just kind of becomes indicative of like, oh, things are just going back to the way they were, returning back to the status quo that we had in season 1. And while I think that there is some clever critique going, like I think the critique that they were going for here, which is like characters just come back from the dead and not everyone's going to be aware of that. That's a funny joke.
Yeah.
But ultimately, like the big joke at the end where it's like, oh, we don't tell you because it's this dark, traumatic thing, that doesn't feel indicative of like what we actually see in other Star Trek shows.
Yeah.
Like other Star Trek shows, we have characters coming back and it's more just like it's not like there can be trauma to it like Culber and Discovery, but it's not like some weird, mystical, incomprehensible journey. And so I feel like some of the jokes were like Rutherford's imagining how he came back was funny and I liked those jokes. But the ultimate meta commentary that the joke sort of lands on of this like trauma thing doesn't feel like it's really commenting on Star Trek as a whole, and ultimately it feels like, okay, so you're rolling back some of the physical stakes and some of the investment that I had in the long-term like growth of these characters in an actual like in the physical world in order to tell like a commentary that doesn't work for me as much. The one caveat I will say to all of this, that while I am somewhat disappointed a little bit this season so far in the physical stakes of Lower Decks so far, what I have thought they have followed through in really, really excellently, and even the Shaq storyline shows that, is the emotional stakes of the characters, because I feel like every single one of these characters, while they may be sort of reverting back to the physical status quo, their emotional status quo, their emotional follow through in this entire season has continued to be pushed forward in a fantastic way. And I think that's shown here with Rutherford being kind of traumatized himself at seeing this man who died for him come back to life. And being really upset by that. And you see like the small moments of like him being like when Shax comes in, it's like, baby bear, what's going, like those little like moments. I was like, that warms my heart.
That.
And so and so while I thought the Shax coming back was funny, and I think there was a smart critique there, I do think it undercuts a little bit of what I think makes Star Trek Lower Decks so powerful, and that is, while a comedic show, still having strong characters with stakes that I can invest in.
Yeah, and I would add on to that in terms of the even though the character's going back to a status quo, their emotional status quo it doesn't go back to status quo. That could also be seen with, I guess, Boimler, in the fact that he's very upset that he's had to come back to the Cerritos and he doesn't really know his place, and that's shown with the fact that the ship doesn't recognize him. And I think that. And I do share your views on the fact that I don't really want it to go back into each season's basically, back to status quo, like in TNG in a sense, but just that emotional follow through is really nice. And then we can also say the same with Mariner and Tendi, in the fact that they thought they were friends, but then they were like, we haven't really done much together.
Yeah.
And then in this episode, they, as Mariner says at the end, friendship, as she rams the ship in a shuttle. It just shows a lot of development of the characters, even if they're in the same position as it was in season 1.
Exactly, yeah. I think the emotional follow through on this show is, they have not disappointed me at all on any level on that front. Yeah, I think my only criticism so far with this season as a whole that Shax is indicative of is just the returning to the just regular status quo of the show. Because this, it just, I worry that there'll be episodes coming up further that will be like, oh, this could have just happened in season 1 and we wouldn't have known the difference. And I don't want that for the show. I want Star Trek Lower Decks to feel like, oh, it's progressing forward and we see differences within the show.
And also we kind of have that in this season, in the fact that the first episode of season 2 is basically a repeat of the first episode of season 1. However, it's the characters that have changed that make it different. So I think that it could be the theme that it may go back to normal, but the characters develop, which is interesting.
And honestly, I don't even want to put it past the writers to have the whole season be that kind of a meta. like the finale is literally just like, wow, everything's back to normal, and then something really shakes it up. Like, I could see this being a really long meta commentary, but as it stands, that's just my one kind of concern, is that while the characters will progress forward emotionally, we'll just get to a point where like everything's the same, and you couldn't really tell the difference if you popped on a season 1 and season 2 episode, which kind of is TNG in a way, in what it was doing. But I feel like it's just because TNG did it, while the show is very much evoking TNG, I feel like it's something that I would exactly. It doesn't need to follow that exactly.
Yeah, and I know something that we talked about before we went live, and one of the reasons I said I can at least agree with while I personally am very happy Shax is back, it did raise a concern for me, and that was that our new security chief was just going to get swept under the rug, and we were just not going to see him again, or if we do, it's going to only be for him to be shuffled out the door to make room for Shax. And I really liked the new character, so I would have liked to see more of him than just the one episode, especially since he only had like a few lines because he was a puppet most of the time. So I would have really liked to see that character utilized more before Shax came back, if they were going to do that.
Yeah.
At least give time for us to get to know this new character. That'd be like if, in TNG, if when Crusher left,
Pulaski.
Yeah, Pulaski comes back, or comes in only for like a single episode, doesn't really say anything, and then like boom, Like Crusher's back, but like Pulaski's there somewhere probably, but we don't really know from there. Like, you know, if it was just one episode, how jarring it would be. So while I do really like Shax's back, I do really want to see more Kayshawn because he was a great character and I really like the character.
And we could get way more of Kayshawn and explore more of how does a Temerian navagate non-metaphor speaking species in a work environment.
They don't forget about him, but I fear they will. It's my only concern right now that this episode brought. But outside of that, I really liked the episode.
Yeah, I mean, and like I said, other than Shax, we'll talk more as we go into other stuff. But other than the Shax stuff, which I liked it for the storyline in the episode. I'm just more worried about it in the larger conceit of the show. Right. But within the episode, it's fine. And everything else in this episode, I thought was phenomenal. Like it's telling to me that like Tom Paris was literally back in this episode, and that is probably the thing that I have the least to say about, which is insane to me. And it just shows how strong this episode is.
Yeah, they, while I know the word underutilized was kind of tossed around a bit between us, I almost don't want to say underutilized, because, I mean, yeah, it is the focus of the Lower Decks, and yeah, he is a guest character, but because like what you said, I mean, there was so much else going on with the episode that I feel like anything more and it would have, you know, taken away from that. Anything less, and we would have actually been like, whoa, hey, I thought he was going to be a little bit more. I feel like it was a perfect mix of him talking both in plate form, which we saw, and then on the bridge where, you know, it was comedic, yes, but, you know, it was funny. So, I did really like the usage of him. I don't think it was too much, I don't think it was too little, but you're right in the sense that I almost forgot it happened. Like, not almost forgot it, but just, it was the least it didn't.
Yeah, weirdly, it was the least exciting thing.
Yeah, there's nothing else to say about it other than he shows up. Like, yeah, cool. I'm happy he's there.
I actually like that, to be honest.
Yeah,
I think that it's a perfect amount to use because, like, especially with a show like this, one of the things that I think the trap that some shows fall into is too much fan service.
Yeah.
And I think Lower Decks sometimes dips its toe into that, like, a little bit too much fan service stuff. But what I think they've done a really good job is when they've had cameos, like with Riker and like with Troy, is they're able to come in, they're able to be these cool moments of like, oh my god, yes, this character's back. Yeah. But the show never, like, leans on that being the point or the major thing of the episode. Like when Riker comes in season 1, he and Troy come in the Titan, like, it's a cool moment, but the journey is still focused on Mariner and Boimler. Same here. Tom Paris is in this episode, and it's like, cool, Tom Paris, and there's some fun, like when he yells Kazon and attacks Boimler. It's hilarious. It's hilarious.
It's like, what? We're in the Alpha Quadrant. Tom, what are you doing?
Exactly. But like, what I appreciate is that while that's there, the storyline there is, as Dom was saying, like, the storyline was focused on Boimler and Boimler's feeling out of place being back on the Cerritos, and how he doesn't feel like he fits in anymore because even the ship doesn't recognize anymore, and he's changed a bit. And now he doesn't exactly know how he fits in with this coming back to the Cerritos. And I like that it stayed on that journey and didn't go more like, hey, look, Tom Paris is back, so we're going to have Boimler be on a big adventure with Tom Paris, and look at all Tom Paris doing the Tom Paris-y things, and he's going to make all these different references. Like, I like that he was there enough to be something cool and fun for the fans and to serve a plot function for Boimler, but that the storyline stayed focused on our characters, because it's an easy trap, and I've seen it in dozens of other shows to fall into, where it's just like, let's make all these references. Like, that was the problem with Star Trek Into Darkness, to be frank, and or one of the problems with Into Darkness. And so here, I think it's tastefully done in a way that services our characters and the story and the show, but also is a fun little cameo.
And I think it probably helps to serve any Lower Decks fans who haven't really watched a lot of Star Trek, because it's not like, oh, you need to know who Tom Paris is. They're just like, oh, a famous person's on the ship. Boimler wants a signature. It could have been any character. It didn't have to be Tom Paris. But what I what I really liked personally, which just a little note for the Tom Paris stuff, is so he's doing like a tour around the ships for morale reasons, and Captain Freeman's like, oh yeah, you can give it a whirl, but don't send us to the Delta Quadrant. I want to know how many captains told Tom Paris that. Make that joke.
He's over there
so he's just like,
oh, it's like me when I tell people my name is Brie, and they're like, oh, like the cheese, and I'm like, ah ha 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 ha, yeah. Like, yeah, heard that before.
I had the same. My dead name before I transitioned to be Jesse. My dead name was James, and so my full name was James Earl. And so every single time they're like, Darth Vader, James Earl Jones. I'm like,
like, oh, never heard that before.
Yeah. It's like, oh god.
yeah.
But, well, we talked about the good, and we talked about the bad.
Let's talk about the great.
Let's talk about the great. What is the great? Because I know what my great is, and I think it's probably pretty close in line with Jesse's, because me and her both have very similar, like, I think we have the same favorite character. So this is going to be a lot of fun. So I think I'm just going to go ahead and say, because I've also seen it in chat, there was so much Orion. There's just so much Orion stuff. We got to go to see an Orion city. We got to go where it's just, like, learn more about Tendi in general, who I love. She's my favorite character. And she's this bad bitch. Like, she keeps a secret, though. She's like, whoa, I don't really do this life anymore. But, you know, because she's an Orion and because she's a female, that makes her a bad bitch, and I love it.
I loved her story. Reminds me so much of Nog, because I think there was this interesting little moment where she says to Mariner, you know, I'm always trying my best to be kind and caring and thoughtful of other people because I have to be in order to try and get ahead. And that rings so real that, like, when you're an outsider person in any situation, you're always like, I want to do my best. I want to try to please. I mean, there's even stories about, like, how like women in many sort of male dominated fields always put in, like, extra work and like make cookies, like do extra things, put in extra hours just so they can be noticed because they're seen as the different outsider one. And so Tendi, and I'm sure that happens with, you know, people of color and different ethnicities and things like that in real life. And so for Tendi to show that feels so true and so real. And it also just speaks to like understanding her pathos of why she is such a like she's a kind, enthusiastic, wonderful character, and yet that comes out of a very real, like, mental, like, thing that she's, like, dealing with and having, and, like, some stuff that she has to go through, which is, again, why I love Lower Deck so much.
I'm so sorry, by the way,
emotional.
My dog is destroying my desk right now because it's storming, so if my cameras go falling, if, like, I just shut off, it's because my dog is just tearing my desk up right now.
Okay. No worries. But yeah, no, I just think that's why I have my door closed, because Newt will come in here and be all over my desk. Newt, my cat. But yeah, no, it's just the emotional through line of this show is wonderful, and I love her relating to Mariner, who also had her own emotional catharsis of being like, seeing like, I don't invest in other people because they typically abandon me, or I feel they abandon me. And so I don't invest in other people, and sort of them sort of coming together and understanding that, just like, it's why I love this show so much, because it's funny and nerdy and dorky and Star Trek, but yet the characters just feel so real within all of that. And I think that the writing was excellent on that front.
I did like the fact that they kind of played off of the whole, like, back and forth of, how did you not know this piece of information about me? And it's because it's true, we as the viewer, and it's a little bit meta too, it's like, we as the viewer don't know all that much information about these characters yet. And so when they're back and forth, like, how'd you not know this about me? I talk about it all the time. And it's like, that's obviously both for the character, but also for the viewer. And I really like that, because they're acknowledging that, you know, and I think this has to do, again, with coming back to the same complaint I've made since not complaint, but one of my biggest drawbacks I have to New Trek is that 10-season episodes, or the 10-episode seasons, the 10-episode seasons, and it can really hinder in some ways, especially with a show so short, where they're like, to me, that's them acknowledging that in one episode, or in one season, 10 episodes, they can only get so much of what they want across. And so when they're coming in with, Tendi and Mariner getting to work together for the first time, talking about how we don't know this much about these two characters, I feel like they're acknowledging that, and they're maybe not saying like, hey, wait, we'll learn more about them, but just acknowledging that there is information about these characters. They do have backstories. It's just we haven't gotten there yet. And I think, like I said, it all ties back again to being such short seasons. And while I understand why we have short seasons with streaming services and stuff like that now, it does make it hard to get across what I think the showrunners and the creators want in such a short period of time.
It's an interesting double-edged sword with 10 episode seasons, especially with Lower Decks. I have slightly different critiques of the number of episodes when it comes to like Discovery and Picard. But for Lower Decks, it's interesting because I do feel the 10 episode seasons and agree with you, but I also feel like these episodes, every episode of Lower Decks feels so efficient.
Yes.
That even though it's only 30 minutes or less, it's like, 22 minutes? They feel like a full 45-minute episode of Next Generation. They feel just like they're just so compact in getting these storylines and doing everything a 45-minute episode of Next Generation does in 20 minutes. Getting us these character arcs, getting us all these jokes, giving us these moments, and also giving these still like rest moments. And so I feel like that is partially because the writers only have 10 episodes that they have to focus on, and so they can really focus on making every single piece line up and do really, really well, as opposed to if you go and look at like Next Generation or Deep Space Nine or Voyager, like the episodes will be like really, really good, but even like some of the best episodes, there'll be like scenes that are just like, that's weird or strangely paced or what's going on here, because they had to pump out so many episodes and they had to be so long that there's just less time to really make every single scene sing to its fullest. Whereas I feel, and that's not, I mean, sometimes those weird things lead us to wonderful, beautiful moments in Trek canon like Threshold. but I feel like these episodes are so efficient, and that's only because there's so few episodes, but it also because these episodes are so good, it makes me want more.
Yeah.
So.
And it's very interesting because like a lot of the Lower Decks episodes usually have like 3 or 4 plot lines going on. You usually have like, oh, here's the plot line of the bridge crew, which you don't see all of, and then there's usually 2 for the Lower Decks and their groups. Like this one has, you have the Rutherford stuff, you have the Boimler stuff, you have Tendi and Mariner going off, you have
the bridge.
It's kind of alluded to that there's more about the bridge. Like Shax comes down and it's like, oh, we've got that Tom Paris thing later, but up for some racquetball. Which I want to see Shax in Bashia's racquetball outfit.
Just big
that
buff.
Oh my God,
like him big and buff,
Yes.
just like, oh. He'd pull it off. He'd look good in it.
That like weird
pull it off.
silver
Yeah.
uniform thing.
It's a weird silver, and it has some sort of like crop top element.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
good old Bashir.
Those are the moments, by the way, that I was talking about with like when you have so many episodes of a season, you're just like, it's weird, but heavens do I not love the fact that we have the weird racquetball episode of Deep Space Nine.
I think one of the reasons it's harder for me with Lower Decks as opposed to like, and this might be where we actually differ in opposite ways, as opposed to, I'm not so opposed to 10, 11, or 12 episodes of Discovery or Picard as I am Lower Decks, only because I think it's the 20-minute episodes is what gets me, because I'm just like, there's only 20 minutes, and 20 minutes, 10 episodes, it's not a lot of time. Whereas if you take 10 episodes that are an hour, that's nearly 10 hours. I mean, it's almost 10 hours of content. Yeah. So for me, it's like you watch the episode and then it's over, and you're like, oh, that was good, can't wait till next week. But then you're like we're coming up on episode 4. We're almost at the halfway point, and it's just like that kind of stuff where I'm like, whoa, there's more I need to watch. Like, I want more. And I think it's just the sheer fact that it's animated, it's like a comedy, and that it's short. It's like boom, boom, boom. It's like 3 things.
It's very digestible.
Yeah, they're so digestible.
Like you can put it on.
Yeah, and I could just
whenever.
watch it all the time. So I really wish they had a few more episodes each season so that I could just not be so dreading the, oh gosh, we're at episode 10 already.
Yeah. And
I
like,
mean, I think it's...
Okay.
Sorry. No, you go. Yeah.
Oh, I was trying to say just how packed this episode was
Yes.
with the fact that with the Tendi and Mariner stuff, which I guess would be the meatiest part of this episode, they went to like 3 separate planets. And that's just like when you think about it,
That
even
could
though
be
it's
its own
just like
episode.
one set piece, it's ridiculous how
Yeah.
much they just get through. Yeah.
They do a lot.
I also think it comes down to like, for me, and then this gets into a larger conversation outside of this episode, but it gets also down to like production differences.
Right.
Because you look at like something like Discovery and Picard, those shows, because they are live action, they are still writing episodes as they are starting to film them. And so they're like trying to like do 2 things at once and like tell their whole story while also like trying to work the production and also get the writing down. And once they send out a script and it's being filmed, there's not much they can really do in the middle of it to try and go back and fix it. And so like that's why we see, I feel like if you look at like Discovery and Picard, those shows are a little bit less efficient and have feel like they have a little bit more mistakes or issues here and there. And that's not a knock against the shows, it's just the differences of production in that like they just have to get things moving as they're still writing it.
It's just the way
Whereas,
live action is.
yeah, where Lower Decks, like they can still be writing the episode up until like a week before it goes out or whatever, because they can do animation and change stuff and like get people in a booth really easily. I mean, I'm sure it's not that crazy, but they can be working on these until very, very soon to the end, as opposed to, and they can like be adjusting things as they go and seeing what works as they go, as opposed to something like Discovery Picard where like they're in it. And so I feel like that leads to like a difference in terms of feel and tone, in terms of like this show feels so much more digestible because they can fit everything in to 20 minutes, as opposed to like Discovery and Picard, which has to sort of like figure it out a little bit more on the fly. And so I feel like it makes Lower Decks feel so digestible and yet so compact and efficient at the same time. And it's sort of like an interesting. So it conversely makes you feel like you want more Lower Decks, but it also feels like you're getting more with less in a strange way.
And talking about the production of Lower Decks and stuff, apparently when Mariner finds out that Tendi's first name is Devana and was like, I just thought Tendi was your name, like Odo. Obviously, Odo Ital is his full name. And Tawny Newsome was told Mike McMahon, I can't say this because the Trekkies will come for my head, because Odo does have basically a full name. It's not the same. And Mike McMahon was like, nah, we're keeping it.
That's great.
I can't remember if that was in a pod directive or a interview for season 2, but I remember that. I think it was an interview when they were doing the red carpet thing for season 2. But yeah, I just find that humorous, that because they told us that 6 weeks ago, and now we're just finding out, oh, it's this scene.
Yeah, that's so great. I love that.
Yeah.
So
also, well, go on.
Oh no, I was continue what you're gonna say.
I was also going to say, also in that scene, which was a nice little detail, was that the Orion blacksmith, I forgot his name, has the Orion symbol on his apron from the animated series, which is like a yellow W shape, which is just a nice little detail because the Orions in the animated series were so different than every single other Orion we've ever met. So it's nice that they're putting that in, as we see a lot of animated series references in Lower Decks, which is always worthwhile because I actually like the animated series. I think it's fun in a weird way. So yeah.
Do you know if there were any? Sorry.
No, you go. You go.
Do you know if there were any like famous voice actor guests? For some reason, that voice actor that played Tendi's cousin sounded so familiar to me, and it bothered me. It's still bothering me because like I can hear his voice in my head, and it bothers me because I feel like he's in something else.
I'll look it up while we go, but
because I didn't know, because like I know that one time in season 1 when I was like, yeah, something about that voice, and they're like, yeah, it was gosh, who was it? The voice actor.
Do you remember the name of the cousin?
I don't.
What his name was?
Deanna? Deanna?
It had a apostrophe in it, which
Yeah.
I thought that was
I
only
think it was
females did
D
that. So I was
apostrophe Onna. Deani. Deani.
Donnie.
Deani. Deani. There we go.
But
We were able
because like that
to
happened
sound
with
it
the
out.
Ferengi when it was like it was the same voice. It was Tom Kenny, and I was like, oh my gosh, no wonder it's so familiar. But that happens to me sometimes in the show where I'm just like, God, that voice sounds so familiar. I'm like, what else?
Yeah,
are
and
they
they've had some
in?
like really great voice actors,
Yeah.
not only from like Trek Legacy, but people. Well, I guess you can say Nolan North is also a Trek Legacy character because he was in Into Darkness, I believe. But you get a lot of well-known voice actors like Vanessa Marshall and
Right.
Nolan North, and it's just great that we're getting
love
all these
that.
people. And then with Prodigy going forward, we've got so many astounding voice talents that it's just amazing that we're getting John Noble, we're getting D. Bradley Baker,
Yeah.
all these great people that you've heard in other things, and you're like, oh my god, they're actually
I
in Star
think
Trek.
that's
now.
one of the reasons in a way, I like voice actors more than not in all senses, but a lot of times I prefer, outside of like the Trek sphere, I care about and I like voice actors more than I care in like celebrities. Like I will follow voice actors and keep up what they do and like all this kind of stuff. And I don't know if it has to do like I don't know because like I did theater and I'm like I don't do that with Broadway, but for some reason I just love. I think it has to do with just how diverse they can be, and you hear them and you're like I know that voice, and like the range of what they do, even when they're in a completely different character, you can still recognize them. And I like that we get that in Lower Decks, where we get guest appearances from voice actors that maybe aren't Star Trek, but we know from other things, from other shows or movies. And so, like, you know, when that happened with Tom Kenny, I got like so excited. I'm like, no way! Like, that's awesome. Like, it's those moments make this a lot of fun.
I think part of the reason that is like voice actors, like number one, they're so skilled and as you say, so diverse and varied and get to do so much stuff. Both they get to do so much stuff within their own work. Like look at D. Bradley Baker and like The Bad Batch, getting to do like 20 different characters within one show. So they have that skill, but then they also get to be in a lot of things. And then on top of that, because they're voice actors and they don't necessarily have like the fame of celebrity, they feel a little bit more like real people.
Yeah.
Like when you watch like when you watch I watch the Picard and Discovery panels, and I love those actors. I love Patrick Stewart, I love Sonequa Martin Green and stuff like that. But you can tell that they're actors that are used to like being on the screen and like being like, I get to talk to a camera now. I'm Picard. Rah, rah, rah. Whereas you look at like the panels for Lower Decks
and they're all like laid back, like just
Prodigy,
shooting the shit.
yeah, making fun of each other. Like I just love like in the Lower Decks panel, like they're just like
Jerry
making fun
O'Connell
of like
is the best in
energizing,
Yes,
energizing,
guys. We're energizing.
My favorite bit from the Lower Decks panel was when Mike McMahon, when they were talking about like all the different actors who have played Superman, like Jerry O'Connell's played Superman and Jack Quaid played Superman, and then Mike McMahon's like, and I play Superman in my bedroom in my pajamas.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my god.
Yes. So.
So yeah, they feel real. One other thing, can I mention one other thing that just like makes my little LGBTQ heart sing in this episode?
Oh my gosh,
for
is it the same
two
part?
different reasons?
I think we're probably thinking
the same part.
thing.
So, right.
Yeah.
Yep, right where Mariner, she sees the sexy Orion cousin of Tendi, and she starts hitting on him, and then she confirms in that moment that she doesn't say bisexual, pansexual, so it could be either, but she confirms she's into men, women, and she says non-binary folks and binars or whatever, which I love. Number one, canonical bisexual lead character, which is amazing. I mean, you could argue that 7 of 9 and Dax are bisexual. You could argue it, but this is the first like official main cast member that is like 100% confirmed to be bisexual or pansexual.
She's basically just like up front to the camera is just like, here's my list of and it's varied.
Yeah. And I love that. But so number one, that's awesome. But number two, this is something that means a lot to me personally within Star Trek, is that Mariner makes the distinction between non-binary people as like people who exist that are non-binary and aliens who happen to have non-binary genders, which is like, I know it's a small, subtle thing, but honestly, making that distinction means so, as a non-binary person myself, that just small little subtle acknowledgement means so much to me, because like in Star Trek there's been a continual problem up until Discovery just last year with Adira, that non-binary people weren't really seen as people necessarily, but like alien metaphor within Star Trek. And so just to have that little acknowledgement, even as just being small, to be like, no, non-binary people are people, and there's non-binary aliens that also have different versions of gender that we understand. That little acknowledgement is so amazing, and I really appreciated that. So bisexual / pansexual confirmed main character, hell yes. And number two, just acknowledging non-binary people as people is just absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, I think this episode did a really good job of just not with a lot of things, like, Tendi addresses throughout. This episode did a good job of just covering a lot of bases with, like, not necessarily like, there was that one side of stereotyping where Tendi's just like, the whole episode from the moment they were doing like the Domjot table, and she's just like, oh no, I know you wouldn't do it, but like, can you though? And she's like, no, I'm like not even that kind of Orion. And then they go to the planet, and she's just like, whoa, who are you? Like, can you do this on the Cerritos? And she's like, no, this isn't me. Like, this is not like my like this culture that you know of is not me. And like them making that distinction was nice, because like up until now, every Orion we see is either a slave trader or super sexy, but like also controls men, and like, they like either way, like they're always seen as like conniving. They have another reason for talking to you or getting on your ship, or like there's never, up until now it's always just been Orions equal pirates and conniving. So and just like the Ferengi, like you said, it's the same thing. Like, I don't think Tendi's the first. I'm sure there's plenty of Orions. Did she say she's the first? I don't remember, because I feel like we've
The
seen
first Orion in Starfleet.
Yeah.
Yes. You see one in the Kelvin
Okay,
movies,
that's why. But
who is not a
right.
pirate, but
so that's
this is
it's like another one of those where it's like, just like Nog was the first Ferengi in Starfleet, she's the first Orion. There's so many stereotypes that people have, and we saw that in DS9, where even Cisco himself was like judgmental.
In Discovery with Janet Kinder in last season of Discovery.
Yeah, where like Cisco is just like, the Ferengi this, the Ferengi that, and finally Quark is just like, why are you doing this? Like, humans have these negative things about them too. Like, don't it's not everyone is exactly the same, and Nog had to fight through that, where he's like, me and my father aren't your typical Ferengi, and we have to fight hard to show that. And now we have Tendi kind of doing the same thing, and I really like that. But I also like how quickly Mariner, where it's like, she's corrected once, and it's like, okay, and then she does it again, and she's like, okay, I'm sorry, let's, and then Tendi's kind of like, no, this is why I feel this way, and then Mariner's like, well, I also feel this way. And so you really get to see them open up as characters, and the character feels more real that way. Like, there's minimal conflict, but still enough that you're like, all right, this is stuff that people can relate to. So I really liked this episode, because it it had that aspect of like subverting what people expect from someone based on preconceptions, and then we have just this complete acceptance of LGBTQ Mariner here. So I really liked it. The whole episode, that whole part, that little segment with Mariner and Tendi, I loved everything about it. It was the best part of the episode. I really can't say anything bad about it. So, and I liked the
I
boss
think it was...
at the end was like the whole adventure with them. The whole adventure with them was just the best from beginning to end. They had the best storyline this episode, and then for it to be the box at the end that Ta'ana wanted, I'm like, yes, that makes so much sense. She's a cat. Like, I love this.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too that I also appreciated that I think you touched upon earlier, but I thought was so smart. I think Dom, you mentioned this. Like, the whole conceit of this episode was like, oh, Mariner and Tendi haven't hung out all that much, which was a critique that I know I had, and I know a few other people had of season 1, where like we mostly only got Tendi and Boimler, or sorry, Tendi and Rutherford and Boimler and Mariner hanging out together. And so this sort of like switching it up and having them go together sort of was fixing that criticism. But I loved the fact that they made it not only an active thing that the show was addressing, but made it part of the characters' storylines and made it part of their character. It wasn't just like, oh, this is a writing thing that we made mistakes, so we'll toss them together in some random storyline. It was like, no, they made the reason that they didn't hang out together part of the character's arcs.
Right.
And I'm like, that's how you address criticism. Super that's the best way. I love writers to address criticism in works. When writers in any show not only say, we're going to take that criticism that you addressed, we're going to address it head on, we're going to make it part of the story and make it part of what we're telling. And that's the sign, I think, of just like really intelligent writers to be like, this is a criticism, we're going to address it, we're going to go do better about that, but we're also going to do it in a way that like comments on our own storytelling and characters and what does that mean for these characters. So I like you, Brie, like this whole storyline with Tendi and Mariner, I think is one of the best storylines, definitely one of the best storylines that Lower Decks has done, and honestly one of my favorite Star Trek storylines so far. It was just
I definitely think it's been my favorite Lower Decks storyline. And also kind of like circling back, I know we were talking about you said like, yeah, you could almost argue like 7 of 9 lead character. Something that else I was gonna say that I totally forgot is I really liked how seamlessly they incorporated her basically saying she's bi pan in this episode, because you know there was a lot of criticism, and even myself, like I myself am bi, and even I wasn't super happy with how they introduced Seven and Rafi at the end, because it just, if they had just done one conversation leading up to it, it might have gotten cut, you know? That's what I said before. It could have gotten cut leading up to the writing, and that's totally, like, that happens. But just, like, one conversation just hinting before would have been enough for me to be like, all right, it wasn't just like, all right, final episode, here we go, there's this one little bit of information, but, like, we're really not going to talk about it anymore. Whereas this...
Well, I know they talked to, what's Rafi's...
Michael
actor
Hurd?
called?
Oh,
Michelle Hurd. Yeah,
what?
yeah. She was in a interview recently, and she said that it was her and Joe Ryan herself who decided to push that in, and that it wasn't the writers.
Yeah.
So
that's probably why
there
it
is
felt
that
like
to
it came
consider.
out
So
of
that's
nowhere,
probably why it,
right?
Yeah, came out of nowhere.
So while I do really like that they did that on their own incentive, it did out from an outsider perspective give that. And so and like I said, while it's like a completely great reason to bring that in, and I'm happy that they did, it was more just how it looked on the screen. And now I really like how with this, where she's just like, yeah, you know, like it's just so kind of like when who's the new character in Discovery? Adira, thank you. I have such a hard time remembering their name. When Adira came out as non-binary, and they were just like, yeah, hey, if you could just like use they them, I'd prefer that. And Stamets was just like, yeah, that's fine. Like, so like accepting, like that's what I prefer with, you know, introducing that. So that's why I really liked how like seamlessly it got tossed in. Like, I don't know, I felt like it just fit.
I have both a praise and a criticism, and I agree 100% with you, Brie. What I love about this, as you said, with like acknowledging Mariner's bisexuality, is it is explicit and obvious. Where with Seven and Raffi, it was something that was like, number one, is the actor's choice, but even if it was a writing choice, it was not explicit. It is something, and this is something that we see often with bisexual representation in many media, is that when bisexuality is referenced, it is done in a way where audiences who are LGBTQ, who are bisexual, we will notice it. Like you and I, we notice that Seven... Yeah, we will notice that Seven and Raffi were holding hands, like, oh look, that's that. But straight audiences or people that can miss that will go over their head. Right. And so here in Lower Decks, it is obvious, explicit. They make a point of saying it. It is not like stopping the scene cold to do it. Yeah, it does come out of the moment. Why I liked it. But it is making it very clear and obvious. However, my thorn is, and people are mentioning this as chat, Geek Filter, who I love you, Geek Filter, and a few other people mention this, but I will also criticize this though, is they did the same thing in Picard, because Geek Filter saying that 7 of 9 was with Bjayzl in Picard, but that is again coded,
it's so coded,
the episode. It's not explicit. We will pick up on it. You can definitely have that reading, but if you wish to miss it, you can.
Right.
Yeah.
One criticism with Lower Decks that I hope they fix going forward, because this is something that even in shows that acknowledge characters' bisexuality, and we saw this recently in Loki with the Marvel show, Loki, where in Loki, there is an explicit reference to Loki being bisexual. He says that he likes men and women. However, it is only stated as such, and then after that point and throughout the rest of it, he's only ever seen with women. Now, to a bisexual person can be with any gender, it doesn't negate their bisexuality. That's true. However, it's sort of this double-edged sword, because yes, a bisexual person being with someone of the opposite gender does not make them non-bisexual, but it also is telling that these shows and these things are willing to say, like, they'll make a reference to it, but they aren't willing to actually show someone being open about their attraction. Exactly. And I've seen in my comments when talking about Mariner being bisexual, I said this in my review of, while it is nice that Mariner openly acknowledges that she is bisexual, we have only seen her express explicit attraction to male characters within the show. There has been scenes within the show where we could read a sexual attraction to women in it. Like, for example, in the episode where she's hanging out with Boimler's girlfriend, and you could get a sense there's maybe something between those two. She's made explicit references to, like, oh, that girl's really hot, with when Rutherford was dating another girl, but we never get an explicit reference to she says that girl is hot and I am attracted to her. And so what I hope Lower Decks goes forward doing is that now that they have made this choice to make Mariner explicitly bisexual, they should make the chance to, when it's, and I'm not saying they need to, like, go out of the way and have her be like, every girl's hot, but, like, every once in a while, I mean, I'll do that in my real life, but I really hope that going forward, what they do with Mariner is just, when it feels natural, when it comes up, they will have her explicitly state that she feels sexual attraction to women or non-binary people. Just like, oh my gosh, do you see that, like, that sexy I don't know, that sexy trill girl over there, like that, she's like, just something like that, just to like acknowledge that she has attraction to multiple genders. And so I feel like that is a trap that sometimes bisexual representation falls into. That I think can be do better. And again, it's not an explicit, like, I'm hating Lower Decks because of this. It's just something that it is a common problem we see with bisexual representation, that I just hope that Lower Decks can eschew now that they have done this step, which is excellent. And now this is the next step after that.
Yeah, I totally agree. 100%.
Sorry, that was me being my LGBTQ educator, so apologies for getting on my soapbox.
You're good. But we are... oh, sorry. What'd you say, Dom?
Oh, I was just... so, are we going to talk about what we might know about... well, as in trailers for next episode? How are we going to do this?
I'm the only one who has no idea what to expect this episode.
Have you seen... Has either of you seen the preview for next episode?
I never know where to find them. I haven't
seen the preview, and because I've gotten screeners of next episode, so it's going to be difficult for me to not reveal.
So we do know that the episode is about Mugatos, the is it Private War, the TOS
the horn
episode?
Creature things? Okay.
The horn creatures from A Private Little War.
Yes.
That's the episode. So they're back, and in the trailer we did see some Denobulans with a Mugato. So there is the possibility that we do see Denobulans next episode. Which is pretty cool.
Enterprise references.
Beautiful, because Denobulans are great. Please bring Phlox back. We want him. I think that's all they've really shown about next episode. So yeah, I'll look forward to that, which starts streaming tomorrow.
Or if you're like
me,
like if you're like me and you stay up till crazy hours to watch the episodes when they come out, because I think, Jesse, your time, it's midnight, right?
It comes out my time, Pacific time, like 11. 30. Yeah, even Mike McMahon on Twitter's like, it comes out sometime between 11 and midnight.
Yeah, pretty
I
much.
don't know when.
Because like that's the thing
And
is I know I would normally like I always stay up late for Pacific time. So for me, Pacific time, that's 2 hours. That's 2 a.m. So that pushes it back for me. I've noticed it comes out closer to 1 a.m., which is really good for me because then I can just watch it and go to bed. But I don't like waking up scrolling Twitter and being like, my spoilers. So.
And yeah, for any international people, it'll be up on Friday on Amazon Prime, and Amazon they kind of put it out when they want to put it out, so it's sometime in the afternoon.
It's there.
So yes.
But yeah, I'm pretty much going in blind this episode, which I like. I don't always like when I know what's coming, because then I can be like, oh my gosh, I didn't even know that was expected, you know? Like, obviously, if I, seeing the title will always have Tom Paris, but if I didn't know, I would have been so exciting.
Yes.
But so
I've come to the realization that like I just try to avoid trailers for most things from now on.
But I kind of have to for Truck Central, so it's like I save it for like until like the last possible moment. And I'm like, all right, let's watch this trailer. I try not to dissect it so much that I feel as though I'm giving away the show for myself. Like, I just try to avoid that.
The things that I need to watch, like if I need to watch a trailer for a TV show or something for my own channel and stuff like that I'll watch. But if it's something that I'm not going to be talking about, it's like not going to, like I haven't seen that there's a new James Bond. It's like I'm excited for the new James Bond movie. Don't need to see that new trailer. Don't need to watch it. Like I'm excited for it. Don't need to see it. I'll come and see it when it's out. So.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
But
talking about trailers, just before we end off, because we have you, Jesse, here, have you seen the Prodigy opening?
Yes!
Would you like to say your thoughts? Because you look to have thoughts on that.
It's so pretty. I love this intro. Michael Giacchino's music is gorgeous. It feels so Trek, and yet has like that enterprising young man Kelvin feel to it, and yet it also has this like Voyager feel to it. I love the visuals because it feels so classic Trek in a way, in the sense that it's just like the ship flying through different clouds and very Voyager-esque, but also mixes in modern Trek at the same time with the abstractions of like the characters and the eyeballs. And so like this intro is just this beautiful mix of classic Trek and new Trek in this same way. And I just honestly I feel like that opening is beautiful, brilliant, gorgeous, and such a modern melding of Trek. And it is consistently why I will always argue I love almost to a T. I love animated properties of my favorite franchises more than I love the live action things, because they are able to do these things so well. And I thought that intro was just absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah, the intro absolutely blew me away. I don't know what I was expecting, but it definitely was not that. I think maybe because it's still a kid's show, that I was still kind of expecting more of like I think I was expecting the song to be more like bouncy or lighthearted, but the whole thing I was like, this is a really good score. I'm like, it feels more adventure-y and more like in some areas almost dramatic, where it's like something like a almost sense of dread in the soundtrack in one part, and I'm just like I don't know, this show seems so exciting just based on the intro. It's like there's that hints of excitement and dread, but adventure all in the music itself, and then the animation was beautiful in the trailer. Like everything about that animation, I was like, wow. So I am really excited. I didn't think I'd be that excited about this one, but I'm getting more excited.
The little piece where at the end of the music where they like give the little hints of the original series, like do like that piece, I get just chills, and I was like, oh.
I'm so excited. It's looking. I'm. The more they put out, the more excited I get.
Yeah, and it's interesting talking about the score, because I think the general score will be done by Nami Melamed. I don't know how to pronounce her name. I apologize. But it seems like she's a kind of protege of Michael Giacchino. She did the score for the short Trek Q&A.
Oh, okay.
And all those composers
great. I remember that.
were
I remember that
tutored by Giacchino. So I'm really looking forward to Straw because Q&A Straw was really nice.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just really liked that opening. I liked that we saw all the characters, and there was a hint at the villain. Well, one of the villains, Dreadnought, who's voiced by Jimmy Simpson. And we also have John Noble voicing the villain, who is well known as Denethor in Lord of the Rings. So I'm really excited.
John Noble just has a voice made to be a villain, and I say that with
Yeah.
all as an entirely
That's like Ron
compliment.
Perlman. Ron Perlman's voice is meant to be the voice of a villain. He makes the best villains. It's like there's some people that just sound they could be the nicest people in the world, but they just have this voice that's so good at sounding villainous, and that is like, I love that. I love when people, not typecasting, but like when they, because like Ron Perlman doesn't just play villains, but he is so good
at John Noble.
Yeah,
Great
he's not typecast as a villain, but he definitely has the voice that can play one, and I love that. But yeah. I guess.
Yeah, I think that's our general thoughts on that opening. And if you haven't seen it, you can go watch it. It'll be on Twitter.
Yes.
It's great.
Prodigy. It's gonna be great.
And yeah, and we'll be covering Prodigy here. So look forward to that. And are you gonna cover Prodigy on your channel, Jesse?
I most certainly my plan is I'm gonna cover everything Star Trek that comes out. So yes.
So you've got 53 weeks of work, starting with Lower Decks. So.
Believe me, I know.
Yeah, we know.
Yeah, it's a lot. But I guess before we head out, I'm going to open up chat to anyone if they've got anything they wanted to ask, maybe thoughts on the next episode, thoughts on this episode, though I know there was a lot of discussion already on thoughts on this episode, but anything that chat wants to talk about, I wanted to go ahead and turn it over to chat before we head out, because I do see a lot of familiar faces in here as well. Because someone did mention like Question of Trek. I also saw that mentioned on Twitter, where thinking that it has a slipstream drive for Prodigy, the ship might be
so
a slipstream.
What I want to say about it is that obviously some of the visuals, it just like appears and it disappears. I want it to generate artificial wormholes because it's called the USS Protostar. In the episode Omega Directive in Voyager, Harry Kim says that there's a theory that the detonation of a Type 6 protostar can generate a artificial wormhole. And because you see that its third nacelle comes out and it goes super fast, I want it to basically be the DeLorean from Back to the Future, but in Star Trek. So it needs to get to warp 8.8, and then it can generate a wormhole and can go wherever.
It's not running megawatts.
Get on the ship. We're going to the future.
1.21 gigawatts.
Oh my god, that would.
So that's my
hilarious.
crack theory
That'd be
for
so funny.
what the ship is all about.
Yeah, I actually didn't even catch that reference. In Voyager, I didn't even make.
Yeah,
that
it's only like it's when Janeway's been ultra secretive, and Harry Kim's like, "Ooh, maybe she's discovered a Type 6 protostar, and we're gonna make a wormhole to get home."
Yeah.
In classic, naive, optimistic Harry Kim fashion.
Oh, you poor baby Kim. Aw.
But yeah, before we head out, I also wanted to give Jesse a chance to pitch all of your channels. Where can people find you?
My wares.
Yes.
So just to give you a quick rundown of some of the stuff I do, I have a channel called Jesse Gender where I mainly do thank you very much. Where I mainly do video. Thank you very much. You're too kind. That channel I mainly do my video essay stuff, where it's basically taking nerd stuff, mostly Star Trek, but generally nerd stuff, and talking about different political, social issues, mainly LGBTQ and trans issues, but other stuff as well. And just basically using our nerddoms to discuss real life, because that's what science fiction's all about. It's all about analyzing humanity, and so we talk about that there. I also do all my reviews of everything Star Trek on that channel. Also, if you want more of me reviewing things as well, I also do Star Trek book reviews and reviews of other TV shows like Star Wars The Bad Batch and other movies and things, Marvel shows like What If and Loki, over on my secondary channel, Jesse Gender After Dark. So that's just more news reviews sort of stuff that sort of falls outside of the video essay format, even though my main Star Trek reviews are on my main channel because I'm not consistent at all. And then the only other thing that this audience may find interesting is I have my own podcast called Drawn to Trek that I do with the wonderful Geek Filter, who is down in the chat right now, where we discuss Star Trek Lower Decks and do reviews, basically just what we've been doing, but on my own podcast over there. So check that out. And one last thing, just to pimp, because I do way too many things, is I also have another podcast called What the Frell, where with the wonderful Council of Geeks, another wonderful YouTuber, we go through and are rewatching every episode of Farscape, which is I've never seen it before, so it's my first time watching it, and it's a lot of fun podcast to do. So that's basically everything I do. Jesse Gender main channel, Jesse Gender After Dark, my secondary channel, Drawn to Trek, Star Trek podcast, What the Frell, Farscape podcast. And I never sleep. So there you go.
And of course, all of our Twitter handles are below. If you care to follow any of us, as my dog freaks out from the storm. But outside of that, I am just really excited for the episode tonight. I can't wait to see. I know I'm the only one here who hasn't, but I can't wait to see what happens. I am excited myself. So I can't wait, and I am really excited for everything else that Lower Decks has planned, because I feel like it's going in a good way. So
I'm very excited.
Yeah. But I wanted to thank everybody for stopping by and chat. And until then, live long and prosper.